Welcome back to another BIZ episode of the eCommerce Badassery podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Totillo-Coster. Fair warning that today's BIZ episode is a little longer than my typical one because I had to release it ASAP and my Tuesday episodes for the next few weeks are already spoken for. So what are we talking about? Well, I'm very unhappy about a feature change I learned about recently that apparently happened a while ago, but I have no recollection of receiving any communication about this update. And while I love Klaviyo and will continue to love Klaviyo, I am a little mad at them right now. In a nutshell, Klaviyo used to be able to tell the difference between a subscriber who signed up through a Shopify form versus someone who subscribed by checking the box at checkout. But this is no longer the case. And why does that matter? Because if you are triggering your welcome flow off of the same list that is connected to Shopify in your Klaviyo integration, that subscriber will go through your welcome flow after they make a purchase and subscribe at checkout. This used to not be the case. Klaviyo knew that they signed up at checkout and so would not trigger any flows that were triggered off the list in your integration. Now, for some of you, this may not matter, but for many of you, especially if you have a post-purchase flow, as I recommend, or if you offer a discount in your first email, they could be getting more emails and discounts than you intend. They'll get the Shopify transactional email for completing their purchase. They're going to get the welcome flow and your post-purchase flow. It's not a great experience. And just don't get me started at how I think Klaviyo did not do a good enough job at communicating this. Like I said, I don't ever remember getting any communication about this at all. I'm sure they said something, but obviously they didn't say it enough. The good news is the inquiry that I received from a lounge member the other day when I learned about this is the first one I've ever gotten. So hopefully this hasn't been a huge issue for anyone. But as I always say, upset customers come from unmet expectations and lack of communication, and this is the perfect example of what not to do. Okay, enough ranting. Let's get into some solutions. How you approach this is going to depend a little bit on how you manage your lists, the forms you use, and the content you have in your flows. And you might need to adjust how you've been doing things to accommodate this particular situation. I'm going to walk through a few different scenarios and options, including my preferred one, and then you can choose which suits your situation best. Admittedly, this is a little hard to articulate. I've rewritten this script a million different times in different ways and organized it, so just please bear with me as I do my best to make this make sense. If you are a lounge member or a Klaviyo Badassery student, stay tuned because I'll be releasing some video content to those courses to help you with this. If I wasn't getting on a plane and going to New York 2 days after I found out about this, I would have already released it, but it's at the top of my to-do list when I return. All right, so this is the most common scenario I see and how I typically set things up for clients. On your Shopify site, you have a Shopify form in your footer and you use a Klaviyo pop-up form. Your Shopify to Klaviyo integration is set to go to your main newsletter list, and your welcome flow is triggered off of someone being added to that main newsletter list. So the first option is to swap out your Shopify footer form for a Klaviyo embedded form. Then on both your new Klaviyo footer form and your pop-up, you'll add a hidden profile property to identify those subscribers that you want to go through your welcome flow. And you can keep this really simple and just name the profile property receive welcome flow and give it a value of yes. Then you'll create a segment based on that profile property. This is your receive welcome flow segment. From there, you can do one of two things. Either update your welcome flow to trigger off of being added to that segment, or you can add a conditional split to your existing welcome flow that says, has this property? If yes, they go down your welcome flow path. If not, they'll go down an empty branch and leave the flow. A couple of things to keep in mind here. Anytime you create a new form and you want those people to go through your regular welcome flow, you'll have to remember to add this hidden profile property. Otherwise, they won't make it into the segment or through the conditional split. 2, if you change or upgrade your theme, you'll have to remember to swap out that footer form or any Shopify forms that you're using on your site. And then 3, if you use the built-in Klaviyo subscribe page that's attached to your list, you'll need to add the condition or source is subscribe page to the segment that's going to trigger your welcome flow or to the conditional split in your list triggered welcome flow. So why is this my favorite way? Because it still allows you to keep one main list, and it's the most clear-cut, perfectly segmented and filtered option. You're essentially separating the people who opted in at checkout versus the people who opted in through a form. Note that the source that I mentioned that you're going to use for your subscribe page, this is a profile property that Klaviyo records. It's the sign-up source. So every form or integration you connect to Klaviyo will submit a source to this field when they sign up. Unfortunately, any subscriber that comes from Shopify, whether through a Shopify form or at checkout, has the same source, so you can't use this for your filter. If the idea of hidden profile properties is confusing to you, here's option number 2, is to connect your Klaviyo footer form to a separate list. And this is going to be separate from whatever list you have connected in your Shopify integration. And then if you are using that Klaviyo subscribe page, you're going to use the one for this list instead of the one that's connected to Shopify. And any other forms you create in the future will also get connected to this brand new list. The only reason this isn't my favorite method is because I personally prefer to keep one main list in Klaviyo. And the reason for that is because Klaviyo does not differentiate between email subscribers and transactional contacts. So when you're creating segments like you're engaged in the last 90 days or people who have never made a purchase from you and you want to send them a special email, you have to include the on list condition in that segment. So they are on my newsletter list. Otherwise, you could end up sending emails to people who haven't actually opted in. Now, in this particular scenario, we're only talking about 2 lists, so it's not the worst thing ever. But if you get in the habit of creating a new list for every sign-up form you create, or when you're doing different product launches or events, you could end up with a bajillion lists, and then you have to remember to add them all to your segments, and it's just like, it's a hot mess. But ultimately, I want you to do what's easier and makes the most sense to you. But I want to make sure you have all the facts and potential pitfalls as well. When I work with clients setting up their emails, I'll always give them some different scenarios and ask them just which makes more sense to your brain. And that's how I'll set it up, because ultimately they're the ones that have to manage it. Now, for some of you, the idea of swapping out your form might be stressful. It's honestly not that hard, and you can totally hire someone from StoreTasker or Hey Carson to do this for pretty cheap. But I have some other options for you as well. So option number 3 is to remove recent purchasers from your welcome flow. And this works best if you actually have a post-purchase flow in place already. So what you're going to do is you're going to add a conditional split before the first email in this series that says what someone has done or not done, placed order 0 times in the last hour. If that's true, they go down your welcome flow, and if not, they go down an empty path, which essentially takes them out of the flow. Now, is it possible that someone would make a purchase on your store, not sign up for emails at checkout, then come back and fill out your form to sign up for your email list within the next hour and expect a welcome email? In theory, yes, anything's possible. And if that does happen, they're not going to go through the welcome series. But this seems like a pretty unlikely scenario to me. And unfortunately, when it comes down to time frame, an hour is the shortest time available on the filter. The trick with this method is that any evergreen content from your welcome series that you want these people to receive, you'll want to repeat it in your post-purchase flow. And then on those emails in the post-purchase flow, you'll put a filter on the email itself that says what someone has done or not done, received email 0 times overall time, where email is, and then you'll put in the version of the email from your welcome flow. This will ensure they don't get duplicates. Another option if you have a post-purchase flow is to just filter out people who are in the post-purchase flow. So in any flow in Klaviyo, you can filter out people who have received an email from another flow within a certain time frame. When I was talking to an email friend, she said this is how she does it, but she also has a post-purchase email that goes out every single time someone places an order. This is in addition to the Shopify transactional emails, which honestly seems like a bit of overkill to me, but hey, it's working for her, so I certainly wouldn't count it out. In this case, you'd put a trigger filter on your welcome flow that says what someone has done or not done, received email from post-purchase flow in the last X amount of time. I would make that time as long as your welcome series so they get skipped on all the emails. The trick with this one is you have to put a slight delay on the welcome flow so that it has time to check that that person received the post-purchase email, and it has to be at least as long as whatever delay you have on that post-purchase. Now, I typically set up post-purchase emails to go the day after they place an order, and it doesn't send for every order. So this method wouldn't really work unless you have that email that goes out every single time. And then anyone who signs up through a regular form will now have a delay before they receive their welcome email. So this one definitely isn't my favorite, but I do hope that in explaining these options, it's helping you better understand how Klaviyo logic works and it's not just confusing you more. And again, with this method, you'll want to make sure those evergreen emails are included in your post-purchase flow with a filter for the welcome version. All right, so what if you don't have a post-purchase flow? First, I would say get one created, but in the meantime, you can send your recent purchasers down a separate path. So you would do the same conditional split I walked you through earlier based on people who have placed an order in the last hour, but instead of leaving the branch blank, I would put your evergreen content in there. You'll just want to tweak the messaging a bit considering this is someone who just made a purchase from you, and make sure you set a delay that makes sense based on the other emails you're sending them. And you can consider this a placeholder until you get a proper post-purchase flow set up. And then one more thought before I put this issue to bed so I can finish getting ready for my trip. You could always utilize the smart sending feature on individual emails in a flow. Smart sending is Klaviyo's way of preventing a subscriber from receiving too many emails in a short amount of time. This time frame is set at the account level, and the default is 16 hours, which means if someone received an email in the last 16 hours, whether it's a campaign or a flow, it will skip that email for that subscriber. If you've changed the time frame of this setting based on your sending frequency, then it will be based on whatever you updated it to, because like I said, this is an account level setting. The downside to this is that it just skips emails and then people will continue to move down the flow. So depending on the content you share in your flows, it can get pretty random and disjointed. I almost never use this setting on flows, and instead I will filter them out from one another. I often use smart sending for campaigns though. And just like filtering people based on them having received the post-purchase flow, you are going to need a little bit of a delay here too, so that Klaviyo can catch up and knows that they received an email from the post-purchase flow. So there you have it. 6 different ways to solve for a very important feature that was taken away. I'm not bitter or anything. As I mentioned, Lounge members and Klaviyo Badassery students, I'll be updating your course very soon with some video walkthroughs to help you navigate this. The written version of this content is already in your course portal, so you can read through it and start thinking through what makes most sense for you. If you're not a Klaviyo Badassery student, but you want step-by-step walkthroughs of all of Klaviyo's features, you can snag that on my site right now, and you'll automatically get the updated content once it's released. I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to check it out. And on that note, I'm out. I hope you're having a wonderful week, and I'll see you on the flip side.